They say nothing bad ever happens in small towns. That's a lie people tell themselves so they can sleep at night. I used to believe it too, until I disappeared. My name is Rachel Meyers. I was 26 when I was taken. I lived in a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York, worked as a veterinary technician, and spent my weekends hiking local trails or reading on my porch. My life wasn't remarkable, but it was mine, and I was content with that. The day it happened started like any other. It was a Thursday, late April. I remember because the cherry blossoms had just started to fall, and the air had that crisp, wet smell of new growth. I was driving home from work around 6:30 p.m., a little later than usual. I took the back road like I always did, the one that runs behind Lake Hollow and winds through the woods. I liked that road. It was peaceful, serene, familiar. I didn't notice the van right away. It was pulled off to the side, hazard lights blinking. I might have driven past if I hadn't seen the person waving. Frantic, desperate, and a man, maybe in his 30s, gesturing wildly like something was seriously wrong. My instincts told me to be cautious, but I was raised to be helpful, and he looked normal. Jeans, windbreaker, clean cut. I pulled over. He jogged up to my window. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you. My wife's in labor and my phone's dead. Can you call an ambulance?" It was the kind of situation that feels scripted, too dramatic to be fake, too real to question. My brain flicked through all the cautionary tales I'd ever heard, but his panic seemed genuine. So I nodded, grabbed my phone, and rolled down the window. That was the moment everything changed. He reached in and unlocked the door faster than I could react. I remember the jolt of panic, the scream that barely escaped my throat. Before he slammed something hard against my temple, the world spun, and then everything went black. When I woke up, the air was cold, damp. I was lying on a thin mattress in a small windowless room. Concrete floor, one flickering bulb overhead. My wrists ached. Zip ties. My mouth was dry, and my vision blurred at the edges, like my brain hadn't caught up with what was happening yet. I wasn't dead. That was the first thought. The second was worse. I was somewhere no one would find me. The room had no door that I could see, just a solid wall with a seam that suggested it could open. There was a camera in the upper corner, watching, always watching. The walls were bare except for a small vent and a plastic bucket in the corner. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time doesn't move the same way in a box. Eventually, he came in. Same man, same windbreaker. Only now, he wore gloves and didn't bother to smile. He didn't hit me. He didn't touch me at all. He just stood there and said, "If you cooperate, this will be easier." I didn't answer. I couldn't. He laid down rules. I was to eat when food was given, speak only when spoken to, no attempts to escape. Disobedience had consequences, but he didn't describe them. He didn't have to. That first night, I cried so hard I thought I'd choke on it. There's a certain kind of grief that only comes when you realize no one knows where you are, that the people who love you are looking in the wrong places, that even if they're screaming your name, you can't scream back. In the days that followed, I learned the pattern. He came at the same times, 7 a.m., 2 p.m., 9 p.m. He brought food, sometimes warm, sometimes not. He watched me eat. He never answered questions. The silence became unbearable, so I started talking to myself, softly at first, whispering old song lyrics, reciting movie lines, reading books I remembered from memory. Not to stay sane, sanity felt like a luxury, but to feel human. I imagined what my sister must be doing. Sarah would have filed a missing persons report by now. she'd probably be yelling at the police, telling them I'd never just vanish, that something was wrong, and she'd be right. One night, I noticed something. The vent in the corner, it made noise. A faint humming, but every once in a while, I could hear movement, like footsteps, or voices, muffled and distant. I wasn't in a bunker. I wasn't underground. There were other people, somewhere. That knowledge changed something in me. I stopped crying. I started listening, as if I could hear them maybe. Just maybe. They could hear me. That night, when the man left and the room was quiet, I crawled to the vent. I pressed my mouth to it and whispered, "My name is Rachel Meyers. I'm alive. Please, if you hear me, don't stop listening." I repeated it again, and again, and again, until my throat burned and my hope felt ridiculous. But it was all I had, and somewhere deep down, something in me refused to believe this was the end. Because if I was still breathing, then I wasn't done fighting. The days blurred together after that. At least, I think they were days. It was hard to tell. No windows, no clocks, just the routine. The sound of the mechanical lock unlatching, the shuffle of footsteps, the arrival of food, the silence that followed. He never said his name. I started calling him the keeper in my mind, not because he kept me alive, but because he kept me, like an object, a possession. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his voice was calm, almost gentle. That was the most terrifying part. There was no rage in him, no emotion. He treated it like a job, something clean and procedural, like I was a task to manage. Once, I asked why I was here. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "It doesn't matter." Another time, I asked if he was going to kill me. He didn't answer. Silence became his form of power. Mine became defiance. I started counting the cracks in the wall. 47, I memorized them. I gave them names. I tapped rhythms against the floor, like Morse code to myself. I whispered letters into the vent, hoping someone would answer. No one ever did. One night, I tried screaming. I used every breath in my body. I screamed until my throat burned, until my voice cracked, until I was coughing and choking on the sound. No one came, but he did. He stood in the doorway for a long time before speaking. "Do that again, and I'll take the light away." That single flickering bulb, the one thing tethering me to the idea of time. He knew what it meant, and he would have taken it. I knew it. After that, I screamed only in my dreams. Sometimes, he brought books, random ones, an old thriller, a children's novel, a worn-out cookbook. No explanation. Just dropped them on the floor and left. Maybe he thought he was being kind, or maybe it was another test. I read them all, cover to cover, twice. I imagined the recipes, the tastes. I relived every chapter like it was mine, not because I cared about the stories, but because it was something, anything, to distract me from the walls closing in. One morning, I noticed something new. The tray he brought me, plastic, gray, always the same, had a small crack along the edge. It wasn't much, but it was sharp, and it was something he hadn't noticed. I stared at it for hours. Then, I hid it under the mattress. Hope can be dangerous, but so can being without it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but it made me feel less powerless. It made me feel like I still had some say in what happened next. That night, I asked the keeper what day it was. He didn't respond. I said, "I think it's been a month." Still, silence. I wonder what my sister thinks happened to me. His eyes flicked up. "She's the loud one," I added. "The type who doesn't stop until she gets answers." For a brief moment, something changed in his face. A flicker, a hesitation, then it vanished. "She won't find you," he said. "No one will." He left without another word. I lay awake for hours after that, staring at the ceiling, tracing the same cracks with my eyes. My heart beat so loud it felt like it echoed, but I didn't cry. Not anymore. There's a point where you stop mourning the life you had and start adapting to the life you've been forced into. That's not the same as acceptance, and it's survival. I began watching him closely, the way he walked, the times he came and went. I started memorizing everything: how long the door stayed open, how many steps he took when leaving, what he carried, what he didn't. I started noticing patterns, and then I started planning. The cracked tray became my secret. Each day, I rubbed its edge against the underside of the mattress frame, sharpening it, slowly, quietly, meticulously. If he found it, it would be over. But if he didn't, maybe I'd get one chance, just one, and I'd have to be ready. One night, he came in late, later than usual. He looked tired, distracted. He dropped the tray harder than normal, the contents rattling. I saw his hand shaking. I saw the door open a second longer than it should have been. And I saw my chance. But I didn't move. Not yet. I waited. Because escape isn't just about opportunity. It's about timing, about risk, and about knowing when to bet everything. That night, after he left, I pulled out the sharpened piece of the tray and held it in my hand for the first time. It wasn't much, but it was something. And tomorrow, if the door stayed open just 1 second longer, I would run. The morning I planned to escape, I didn't sleep. I lay on the thin mattress, eyes open, heart racing, thinking through every possible scenario. I imagined success and failure, capture and freedom, and how fast I'd have to move when the moment came. My fingers were sore from gripping the sharpened edge of the tray I had hidden under the mattress, wrapped in a torn piece of blanket. That tiny fragment, sharpened over days, was my only tool, my only secret, my only chance. At exactly 7:03 a.m., the door opened, just like it always did. But something was off. The man I called the keeper walked differently. His steps were slower, uneven. He was limping. When he came into the room, he didn't make eye contact. He placed the food tray down shakily and didn't stay to watch me eat like he usually did. Instead, he turned his back. The door didn't close immediately. I reacted without thinking. I grabbed the sharpened piece and lunged. I wasn't aiming to kill him, just to knock him off balance, to create a few precious seconds to get out. I shoved him hard. He stumbled, hit the wall. The piece slipped from my fingers, but I didn't stop. The door was open. That was all that mattered. I ran. The hallway was cold, sterile, and unfamiliar. Doors lined the walls, some shut, others slightly ajar. I didn't stop to check what was behind them. I just kept running. I turned corners blindly, relying on instinct. Left, then right, then a staircase. I took it without thinking, climbing as fast as my legs would allow. I had no shoes. My feet hurt. My lungs burned. But I kept going. At the top of the stairs, I found a heavy steel door with a red exit sign above it. I almost cried when I saw it. I grabbed the handle and pushed. It was locked. I pulled harder. Nothing. Panic surged in me so quickly it made me dizzy. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Fast. He was coming. No limp this time. I turned and ran again, cutting down another hallway. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to stay ahead. I spotted an open door and dove inside. It was a storage closet, dark, cramped, filled with shelves and cleaning supplies. I pulled the door shut and pressed my back against the wall. I waited. Footsteps passed once, then again. He was searching. I covered my mouth and breathed as quietly as I could, every muscle in my body trembling. But he didn't find me. Eventually, I stepped out and crept along a hallway I hadn't seen before. My legs felt weak. My whole body ached. But then I heard something that didn't fit. Voices, not his. Different. A man. A woman. I couldn't make out the words, but I followed the sound. And then I saw a figure. A police officer. He turned. Our eyes met. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. I collapsed. I woke up in a hospital bed. Everything was white. Clean. Quiet. A nurse adjusted something beside me, and for a moment, I didn't know if I was dreaming, but I wasn't. It was over. I was safe. Later, detectives came. I told them everything, what he looked like, how he walked, what he said, how he moved. His name was Daniel Trent. He used to work as a janitor at a private rehab center. He had been fired years ago for inappropriate conduct, but no one pressed charges. There was no record, just a quiet dismissal. I wasn't the only one. There were others. Some had escaped, some hadn't. Some had never even been reported missing. My story became part of something bigger. My escape forced people to look closer, to investigate what they had ignored before. For once, the system listened, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. But justice didn't come instantly. It didn't end with handcuffs. It came slowly, through long nights in the hospital, through therapy sessions, through walking outside and remembering that the sun wasn't a memory. It came in pieces, small, painful, beautiful pieces. And even then, fear lingered. That kind of fear doesn't just disappear, it settles into your bones, into your sleep, into your silence. But for the first time, I knew I wasn't powerless, and that gave me strength for what came next. The hospital became a strange kind of prison after the basement. Everything was clean, quiet, soft, but my body didn't believe it yet. Even wrapped in warm blankets with machines humming gently beside me, I waited for footsteps in the hall, for a door to slam, for a voice to order me to sit. My body flinched at touch. My voice cracked when I tried to speak. Freedom didn't arrive like I expected. It was quiet, slow, and terrifying in its own way. Sarah came the second day. She walked in without hesitation and sat next to my bed. She didn't cry or ask questions. She didn't try to hug me. She just took my hand and said, "You don't owe anyone anything." I don't remember answering. I only remember the warmth of her hand and the feeling of being real again. I stayed in the hospital for nearly 2 weeks. Doctors ran tests. Counselors visited daily. Detectives asked questions in soft voices like, I might shatter. I answered what I could. Some days I remembered details I didn't know I had. Other days, I couldn't speak at all. The trauma counselor said that was normal. Healing, she told me, would not be a straight line. When I was released, I moved in with Sarah. Her apartment was small but full of light. She had blankets on every surface, mugs that never matched, and the kind of silence that felt safe. She let me sleep when I needed to, talk when I was ready, and stay quiet when I wasn't. News of my escape had already spread. I was the girl who got away. There were articles, headlines, even interviews I refused to give. People called me brave, lucky, miraculous. But I didn't feel like any of those things. I felt broken and exhausted and angry in ways I couldn't explain. The world wanted a survivor story. I was still trying to remember how to live. Daniel Trent was arrested not long after I was found. He tried to escape in a stolen uniform but didn't get far. His name meant nothing to me when I first heard it, but the more I learned, the more the pieces came together. He'd worked at a private facility years earlier. There had been complaints, nothing official, no consequences, just a quiet firing and a sealed personnel file. No one looked closely enough, and women paid the price. I wasn't the first, and I wasn't the only one. The prosecutor visited me in person. She was kind, composed, and clear about what would happen. A trial, my testimony, media attention, possible appeals. She said, "You'll never owe anyone your story, Rachel. But if you're willing to tell it, it could stop this from happening again." I agreed. The trial started 3 months later. I sat in the courtroom wearing a sweater Sarah picked for me. Daniel sat across the room. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler. He didn't look at me once. I took the stand and told the truth. I described everything, from the roadside lie, to the flickering bulb, to the crack in the tray I used to plan my escape. I spoke about the silence, about the rules, about what fear feels like when it doesn't leave your body. Even when you're safe, his lawyers tried to twist the story. They questioned the timeline, my memory, my behavior. They asked why I didn't escape sooner, why I didn't scream more, why I hadn't fought harder, as if survival requires performance. But the jury listened. The verdict came after 3 days. Guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there, hands in my lap, breathing. After so long holding my breath, that was enough. After the trial, I went back to the road where it all started. I stood at the place where the van had been. There was nothing there now, just gravel and trees. It looked normal, unremarkable, and it made me angry, not because it held memories, but because the world kept moving even when mine had stopped. I said aloud, "You don't get to keep me." No one heard. But I didn't say it for them. I started writing after that. First in notebooks, then online. Pieces of my story, bits of truth. I spoke at small events, libraries, shelters, schools. I didn't tell everything, just enough. Enough for someone listening to know they weren't alone. Healing didn't come all at once. There were setbacks, nightmares, sudden panic. The smell of cleaning chemicals still makes my hands shake. Locked doors still make my chest tighten. But I learned how to breathe through them. I learned how to speak again without flinching. And eventually, I reclaimed my name. Not the name from the headlines. Not the girl who escaped. My name, Rachel Meyers. A woman who was taken but found her way back. They say survival is strength. But I think survival is something quieter. It's choosing to live. Choosing to keep showing up, even when you're scared. It's waking up one more time than fear puts you down. And that's what I do now. I wake up, I speak, I live, and I'm not afraid to be heard anymore.